What happens when you use every single dye technique on a single costume? Will it be disastrously chaotic or chaotically wonderful? Go put on your dye shirts, my friends, because we're about to find out. My friends and I are doing a huge group costume for the Texas Renaissance Festival. We're doing Disney's Hercules, and guess who's gonna be Hades? Sarcastic, talks fast, bad temper. It's not much of a stretch for me. Now, Hades' costume in the film is surprisingly historically accurate for Disney. And given that I'm kind of known for making ancient Greek chitons, I could have just knocked out a chiton and stamped on some blue triangles and been done in a weekend, but that's too easy and would make for a pretty boring video. So let's drastically overcomplicate my life for your entertainment and the pursuit of knowledge. First kind of dye is tub dyeing. This is just your standard straight even dye over all of the fabric. We're going to do two different colors in tandem. The dress is going to be dyed turquoise and the cape is going to be dyed gunmetal gray. Now you can do tub dyeing in the washing machine. It creates the most even dye, so if you have a lot of fabric that you have to dye or you're not particularly patient and don't want to stand there and stir, that is a great option for you if your washing machine doesn't drain itself every time you reset the cycle back, because guess what mine does? So I have to do it in an actual tub. A tub inside my tub. Inception dyeing? Time is short and I've done tub dyeing a million times on this channel. It's the most basic, so we're gonna go through this real quick. If you're looking for a full fiber reactive dye tutorial, I do have that. You can check that out. It's linked in the description. And now, with the strength of 5 men, watch her tear through this impossibly thick fabric. Normally I don't wear gloves when just batching up dye, but I've learned recently that Dharma's blue fiber reactive dyes are particularly stainful. Now we will be using fiber reactive dyes for all of the processes on this video. If you are here looking for RIT tutorials, this is not the place for you. RIT does have a really good place in the dye sphere, but dyeing 100% cotton or dyeing any other natural fiber is not it. I'm not going to go into detail as to why, because I've already done that video, but as someone who has worked with dye for more than 20 years and worked extensively with RIT and fiber reactive and acid dyes, I can honestly tell you, RIT sucks for this application. All right, let's prep the inception tub, dye bath. To save time, the toga fabric will get dyed in a bucket on the patio simultaneously. All right, we have turquoise fabric and gunmetal gray. Note that the turquoise has a much more even dye than the gunmetal gray. This is because the turquoise had a lot more room to move than the gunmetal gray did. The size of your vessel matters. I'm okay with this being modeled because this is like a costume piece. The dress I'm hoping to be able to wear IRL. This is going to go off and get cut into pieces so that we can turn it into a dress. And in the meantime, we are going to contemplate the ombre dye. In my experience, ombre dye is the hardest dye technique that you can do. It takes a lot of practice to get a beautiful, even ombre dye. On top of that, we are going to be dyeing it black. Black is an advanced color, especially when you're using cellulosic fibers like cotton and linen. There are various fiber reactive blacks out there, and if you look at Dharma's website, they have a whole page dedicated to the various properties of the black. It's a hard color to get. This specific black that I picked because of the way it does ice splits, because I'm hoping to have a little bit left over to add to our ice dye portion. It splits into grays and blues. If you look at the other blacks, they have a much different color composition, and so the ice dyes are like browny and reds and purples, and that's not what I'm going for. This is not the truest black that you can get. I do not expect it to be a perfectly true black. This is Hades. It's supposed to be a little wackadoodle. I don't care that much. All right, so the first step you need to do when ombre dyeing is deciding where you want your ombre to be. Now this is entirely a personal preference. When you're dyeing with black, you have to use 4 times the dye for just a basic tub dye. And for these other techniques, you have to use more dye than you would use for a tub dye. So I've opted to do only 2/3 in the dye bath. Once you've decided that, you need to decide how many levels of ombre you're going to do. If you want a good ombre, you need at least 4 stages. Dharma recommends 8, and if you're going for a perfectly smooth, beautiful, professional looking ombre, do 8. I don't really care that much for this particular project, so I'm only going to do 4. This will reduce the amount of time that you have to do this, reduce the amount of effort. So what I did last night was I went ahead and marked on the seam allowances where I want each level of dye to stop. It's very important when you do this to use contrasting thread, and so only on the seam allowances, because if you put it in the middle of your fabric, it is going to leave a mark. I like to use polyester thread because it's not going to take the dye. This is my least favorite part. That's why I did it the night before. Let's weigh our fabric. I use a basic kitchen scale for this, just a bowl that's big enough to hold whatever it is that I'm putting in here, and I tear it out. I measure in ounces because that's what the Dharma dye estimator uses. I would much prefer to use grams because it's more precise, but they use ounces, so that's what we're gonna do. All right, so we've got 6.3 ounces of fabric. We'll go drop that in a bucket of hot water with a little bit of dye detergent and go figure out the math. So we'll plug the weight into the dye estimator on Dharma's website and select the color. A normal tub dye would take ½ an ounce of dye. That's a lot of dye for less than ½ a pound of fabric. Now we'll multiply that by 2/3 since the last third won't hit the dye bath. Double the dye amount for 4 stages of ombre. 8 stages would need quadruple dye. Since this requires a huge amount of dye, we'll add some urea to the initial mix in order to help dissolve the dye particles. 1 tablespoon per cup of water. I'm doubling the amount of water here because there's so much dye. This will be dyed in 3 gallons of water, so we'll add 3 cups of non-iodized salt. Unlike tub dye, ombre wants the soda ash in the dye bath at the start. For those of you who watched my TRF build from last year, we did compete in the costume contest with this group costume. So if you're interested to see how we did with that, go ahead and stick around till the end. And since everybody seemed to love the TRF footage I took last year, I did go ahead and film us being our wacky selves in costume this year, so you have that to look forward to too. Now we'll add 1/4 of the dye mixture to the bath. If you opt for 8 stages, you'll add 1/8. Finally, we need to add some calcium oil, a ½ teaspoon per gallon of water. This helps break the surface tension of the water to get a more even dye. Now to dip in the fabric up to the topmost mark you made. This will be the lightest section of ombre. The dip method will get you the nicest grade of color, but I'm too busy and too lazy to stand here for an hour dipping my fabric, so we're going to spoon the dye up past our mark occasionally to help blend the color. Set the timer for 20 minutes, coming back frequently to spoon your fabric. The more you spoon, the better the result. Once the 20 minutes is up, remove your fabric. Add another 1/4 dye and lower to the mark directly below your first one. Spoon and set your timer for, you guessed it, 20 minutes. Pay no attention to this idiot. We'll do this 2 more times, pulling another section out of the dye bath each time until only one section, the bottom and darkest bit, remains. At this point, the soda ash has been in there and reacting with the dye for an hour, so I like to add a little bit of extra soda ash with the final bit of dye just to help it achieve its full darkest potential. I swear I filmed the final ombre dyed cape, but that footage has been eaten by gremlins. If you're enjoying this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and saying hello in the comments. I really enjoy doing makes like this, so if you're enjoying it, that means that I can make more of them. Also, thank you so much for my supporters over on Ko-fi. Thanks to your help, I can continue making videos. And if you have the means to contribute and would like to, I've linked to my page down below. You'll want to set up a double boiler in a well-ventilated area, or even better, a hot plate outside. This is definitely the do as I say, not as I do section of the video, BT dubs. Your safety and health is important. We're using the Batik wax that I got from, you guessed it, Dharma Trading. Here's my little triangle stencil. We'll be using water-soluble pen to transfer our markings. It's a little faint on the turquoise fabric, but it will for sure wash off in the dye bath, unlike some other transfer methods. There are several ways to add your wax to your fabric, and after doing this process, I definitely think painting was the most work. Using a stamp probably would have been quicker. So apparently this wax, specifically the paraffin portion of it, gives off toxic fumes. So I'm trying to do this as fast as I can. It doesn't smell toxic, but Dharma wouldn't state that if it wasn't at least partially true. I did a couple of tests before this and discovered sometimes the wax doesn't penetrate to the back of the fabric, so I'm adding a layer to both sides here, though in retrospect, I think part of that was I didn't let the wax get hot enough. All right, now that we have our front pieces and our back pieces all batiked at the neckline, we're gonna throw the entire dress back into the vat, this time with strong navy. One navy tub dye later, we have this. Wow, does that look good? Now we need to melt the wax off of the fabric. I commandeered some rocks from my apartment's landscaping to help weigh the fabric down. The theory behind this is the fabric will stay at the bottom of the pot and the wax, which is lighter than water, will float to the top. See the bits of wax? When the whole dye bath is cool, you can remove the wax from the pot and reuse it. Okay, here is the finished batik. I think it looks so good. The wax definitely cracked a little bit more than the test runs did, but I'm okay with that because you see that in professional batiks anyway. It's a little bit more evident in the back because I did those first and maybe I wasn't as thorough with the wax coating, but you know what? I still think it looks great. And with the batik done on the bodice is done in the dye bath and we can go start assembling it. We only have two dye techniques left, tie-dye and ice dye. And since they work so well combined, we are going to go ahead and save ourselves the time and do them together. The skirt panels are basted together on one side. I did tub dye the top of the skirt with the rest of the pieces, but the rest is going to get the ice and tie-dye treatment. Each side of the skirt will get pleated with approximately 1-inch pleats. This is a very simple application, one that will hopefully get me a nice vertical line. Now for the tie part. Carefully gather together all of your pleats and secure the ends using small hair elastics. Unlike regular tie-dye, the goal here is just to keep everything together instead of creating bands of undyed fabric. If you want that look, go ahead and use rubber bands instead. Protect yourself with a mask and gloves for this application. It's always important, but even more so when you're dealing with dry dye that can and will fly up into every one of your exposed orifices. We'll start with strong navy. Ice dye is its own special monster, and I could spend an entire video or two discussing all of the variables and their pros and cons. This is still a very new technique for me, and in fact, you'll see in a couple of minutes all of the things that I'm currently doing wrong. Now we'll add the raven black in between. This box exists to hold in the ice and keep it from going all over the place. Now for the ice. It takes more than you think, so save ice or buy a bag ahead of time so you have enough. Then it's time to wait and wait and wait until the ice melts completely. It's been approximately 48 hours since the ice melted, and our skirt's been curing since then, and it is ready to be rinsed out. You do not have to cure it for a full 48 hours. You need to cure it for at least 24. Some people leave it for 48 hours just to make sure all of the soda ash has reacted the way it was supposed to, and I thought that was a good idea, so I went ahead and waited. I know going into this that I made 2, maybe 3 major mistakes that are going to mean that my intended result will not not be what we're gonna get. I have become zen with it. I'm still trusting in the process to believe that we're going to get something cool, but we won't know until the lengthy rinsing process is finished. So I'm gonna go do that and I'll catch back with you when everything's dry. Here's the finished skirt. Definitely not what I was going for. I wanted it to be more drippy and a little less psychedelic, but that was on me, and it's ice dye. You only have so much control. It still looks pretty darn cool, and I'm excited to see what it looks like with the rest of the dress. Looking at Dharma's split suggestions, I did not expect all of this lovely purple showing up where the navy split. That is so cool, and I'm super psyched for that. I also think the black split in a really neat way. It went green, which is what I was hoping. Pretty neat. And that's the rest of the dye. All we gotta do is attach the skirt to the pockets, to the bodice, and add some sparkles and we'll be finished. Fun fact, I was going to add sparkles to the straps, but when I laid them out, it was too busy. You miss it's not done till it's overdone? I know. I know. I can't believe it. The underworld has finally frozen over. Pockets, of course, are necessary. These went into the same dye bath as the rest, and it's interesting that they didn't take the dye quite as well, almost as if it's a poly cotton blend. I did burn test this muslin after out of curiosity, and it did prove to be 100% cotton. So I'm not quite sure why it took the dye like this. Once the pockets were in, all that was left to do was to gather the skirt to the waistband and sew it. Then flip the waistband lining down over the raw edge and slip stitch it in place by hand. Very easy dress construction to make up for the insane amount of dye work.
Now get out of here.
Well, we had a great time at fair, even though it was unseasonably hot. It was one of those things where the day we were there, it was pushing 90, and then the cold front blew in the very next day, and the lows hit in the 30s. Welcome to Texas. As for the costume competition, we got honorable mention. Despite all of our efforts, we lost to a couple of toddlers sitting on a cruelly made toothless. Fun fact, I don't like small children. The closer they are to birth, the less I like them. So to lose to a bunch of 3-year-olds who didn't make their own costumes, I'm bitter. Okay, I'm bitter. But there were copious amounts of adult beverages, and Opal and Jade highlighted us in one of their songs afterwards, so the day wasn't a complete bust. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to see what we did last year when we won the competition, you can check out this video here where I make a beautiful red cape for Sir Hiss. That's about it for me. Thanks for watching. I love y'all, and I'll catch you in my next video.